Okay. All right, welcome everyone. We are here for our fourth in our series of teaching artist professional development. And I am excited and happy to introduce our host, Jef Lambdin. Jef is a teaching artist. He shares workshops in residencies in mime, theater, mask, circus arts, playwriting, ensemble techniques, melodrama, and commedia dell'arte, as well as in arts integration. He, along with Sheila Kerrigan, is a founding member of the Southeast Center for Arts Integration. In 2010, he attended the Lincoln Center Institute International Educator Workshop. He was a North Carolina A+ Fellow from 2005 until 2021. He is also a performer, sharing his mime, variety arts, and mask theater for children and families at fairs and festivals throughout the South as the interactive theater of Jef. Upcoming performances include Earth Day Charlotte, Maryland Fest, and the South Carolina Strawberry Festival. From 1976 to 1993, Jef was a member of Touch, North Carolina's touring mime theater ensemble alongside Sheila Kerrigan. From 1993 through 1997, Jef created the character and performed as Wool-E Bull, the mascot for the Durham Bulls baseball team. We are so happy and excited to have Jef.
Thank you, Amanda. All right. Well, welcome webinarians, however you're going to say it. All right. This is the South Carolina Arts Commission's fourth professional development workshops for teaching artists, and it is titled The Business of Being an ArtsGrowSC Teaching Artist, Assessing Arts Integrated Lessons. I am Jef Lambdin. I am a teaching artist and your host for these professional development workshops. To begin, I would like to introduce the other folks who will be joining me today with all their knowledge and expertise as part of the virtual experience. Please welcome to the screen Amanda Noyce, the K-12 coordinator of the South Carolina Arts Commission. Say hello to the people, Amanda. Yay. All right. And also, please welcome Kimberly Mott, the Arts Learning Director of the South Carolina Arts Commission. There she is. Yay. Okay. Now, as Amanda said, today we're talking about the concept of assessment. Now, realizing that people in our audience live and viewing this later, you guys run the gamut from beginning teaching artists to seasoned professionals. And we'll try to share information that is appropriate to all of you and something all of you can use. We have designed today's event so that a topic will be introduced, and after the topic, we'll have a short time for discussion and questions, and then we'll go on. Today, your questions can be typed into the chat. Does everybody know how to do that? Cecilia, you're good with that? Cindy, good? Okay. And you can also raise your electronic hand, and to do that on my screen, yeah, Cecilia's got it. She's got it. She got her thumbs up there, so she knows how to do that. Great. Okay. And that's how you get our attention when you want to do that. Okay. So let's go to the first slide, Amanda. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Please realize that this is part of a 3-year project. This professional development for teaching artists, and we are in year 2 of the project. So this is our 4th webinar about the business of teaching artistry. And as I mentioned before, it's about assessing arts integrated lessons. As we may not get to all your questions, and if you are watching this later, then you may not be able to just call me. However, right here on the screen is my phone number and my email address. I am always happy to respond to any questions you have after the fact. All right, so here's the information, as well as our main focus, the South Carolina Arts Commission and ArtsGrowSC. Let's go on. If you were with us during webinars 1, 2, and 3 back in February, April, and September, we covered many topics considered to be the nuts and bolts of teaching artistry. All right. We worked on educational standards involving teaching in South Carolina schools. We worked on marketing your teaching artistry. And if you missed any of those webinars, you need to know that every single one of them, including this one, is recorded, and they are hosted on the YouTube channel of the South Carolina Arts Commission. So you can review them anytime you want. They are there in perpetuity, right? Good. All right, let's go on. As Amanda says, this is me. I'm a performer. I make my living performing at fairs and festivals. This last week, I was at the Barbecue Festival in North Carolina performing for children and families. And the next festival I will be in Wilson, North Carolina at the Whirligig Festival. And that's in 2 weeks. So that's what I do for a living. And if we have the next one, I also offer workshops and residencies, right? For students and teachers. I work on mime, variety arts, playwriting, theater, mass, commedia dell'arte, and arts integration. All right. Just so we're all on the same page, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Because this webinar focuses on the work of teaching artists in South Carolina, I'd like to begin by laying out who that is. In other states and in other nations, teaching artists not only work in schools, but they also work in community centers, art centers, refugee camps, prisons, and many other places. According to the South Carolina Arts Commission, this is the current definition of a teaching artist in their arts directory. So this is who we're gearing the whole discussion today towards. All right, good. Welcome, Diana, who's joined us. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, back in webinar number 2 in April, we focused on using the South Carolina College and Career Readiness Standards in the planning of a residency lesson. Today, we're going to focus on the students in your residencies and how you will know what they know or are able to do when you have completed a lesson. It's called assessment. Let's go to the next slide. I know what many of you are thinking right now. Oh no, we're going to squelch the creative impulses of the students. All right, no, I'm sorry. If you're thinking this, you're not alone. As a matter of fact, as I work with teachers on this very subject, many non-arts teachers balk at assessing the arts component of an arts integrated lesson for this very reason. They are afraid they're going to stifle the creativity of the child. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. Let's go to the next slide. You see, assessment and evaluation are two different things. You may hear the terms used interchangeably, but they really are different processes. Assessment aims to enable learners to adjust their approach or study habits so they can enhance their learning. In contrast, evaluation is a process that uses a variety of techniques to analyze program, pedagogical, or course outcomes to determine whether they have been met. Now, assessment is a diagnostic tool focused on the learning of the individual students, whereas evaluation determines the extent to which a program or pedagogy achieves predetermined goals or outcomes. As you can see on this chart, there's a part where they meet, but assessment is ongoing, it's positive, it's individualized for the student, and it provides feedback to the student, right? That's what we're talking about. Let's go to the next slide. All right, why do we assess the students? When you assess what your students know or are able to do, you are actively involved in their process of learning. These purposes enhance the learning environment, making it richer and more rigorous. You can see in this list all the ways that you help the student when you provide assessment. And let's go to the next slide. Now, as you assess your learners' work, you are actually able to provide them feedback so that they can work more efficiently and they can stay on track toward your desired learning target or outcome. Learners use your assessment feedback to improve the quality of their work. As you can see, there are characteristics to your feedback and the outcome of them. All of these help the learner, whether it's knowing specifically what actions to take to move towards their goal, or whether they're on track, or whether how your feedback relates to what's going on right here today, the project upon which we're working. Now, this is predicated on the fact that your feedback is appropriate to the cognitive level of the child, the grade level of the child, and to the task at hand. And it also is predicated on the fact that it's ongoing and timely, that the learner receives your feedback and while their work is still fresh in their mind. Okay? And then it's ongoing. It happens throughout the whole process. So the learner has multiple opportunities to get feedback and improve towards their goal. Okay? Let's stop the sharing. Okay, everybody. Welcome, Amber. Welcome, Diana. Welcome, Miss Cindy. Now, you guys, what comments or questions you have just about assessment? Making sure we're all on the same page and you know what we're working on today. Nothing, we're good? Okay, then let's go on. Okay. Let's thank you, Amanda. All right, let us for a moment look back and remember what we are actually assessing. Now, this will be a short review of the entire conversation we had in webinar number 2, which included work on arts integration. So if you want a deep dive, that's where you go look. In an arts integrated lesson, we use an interdisciplinary teaching practice through which arts and non-arts content is taught equitably and simultaneously in order to deepen the student's understanding of both content fields. Right? Why do we do arts integration? Let's go to the next slide. We use arts integration as a teaching technique because it works. Research has shown that teaching in an arts integrated style actually enhances the learning and retentions of the subjects taught. And the reason is the students are actively engaged in the work. And teaching in this way increases the student's use of critical thinking. In an arts integrated lesson, the student is having to make choices and decisions all along the way. Okay. Also, it connects to the learners by offering different entry points. It's called differentiation. It's called multiple entry points. But the arts are great for making lessons accessible to more students and their styles of learning. And the final reason, you as a teaching artist become more empowered in your teaching by using this style. That's why we teach in an arts integrated way. Okay, let's stop the share. So, arts integration. We've talked about our main goal today is assessment. We're talking about an arts integrated lesson. Are you with me? Are you ready to go? Any questions? Any comments? Any epiphanies? Good. Okay, then let's move on. In an arts integrated lesson, this is the most important thing to remember. We teach two strands simultaneously. We have a standard from a non-art subject and a standard from an art subject in our plan. So we know what we're working on, what standards we're working on. Then when we plan our lesson, we have an objective, a goal, or a learning target for the non-art standard and the art standard. And finally, we want to assess each of those objectives or goals. So for every standard, you have an objective. For every objective, you have to assess it. This is why I encourage people when they create a lesson to not choose multiple standards. It's not a Chinese menu. Yes, we may have touched on different standards, but what is the focus of your lesson? You should be able to boil it down to, I'm teaching this, and in order to get the student to understand both. Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 styles of assessment: rubrics, checklists, and observation. These are the 3 most often used to assess the arts component of an arts integrated lesson. And that's what we're talking about. How do you assess the arts component of an arts integrated lesson? So we'll start with a rubric. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Rubrics are best for assignments or projects that require evaluation on multiple dimensions. So they're perfect for assessing arts of all sorts: dance, creative writing. Rubrics are great for this. Now, creating a rubric makes your standards explicit to both the students and you. And it shows the students how they will meet your expectations. Additionally, the more comprehensive a rubric is, the more it allows for students to receive informative feedback about their performance from the rubric. Even if they don't have many individualized comments from you, they can look at the rubric and see where they are. And finally, rubrics allow for reflection. As you, the teaching artist, have to think about your standards and outcomes for the students, you have to reflect. Using rubrics can help with self-directed learning in students as well, where they have to reflect, especially if rubrics are used to review students' own work or their peers' work, or if students are involved in creating the actual rubric. Okay, let's go on. Here is a couple of examples of rubrics. The first one is a visual arts rubric. The bottom rubric is an example of a theater arts rubric. Please note that I credited the source of each of these rubrics. You see, I'm not good at creating rubrics, so I tend to seek out rubrics created by others to use in my teaching practice. Please note that I only use rubrics that have been vetted by educational organizations. I never use rubrics gleaned from such online sites as Teachers Pay Teachers or Pinterest, simply because they have not been vetted. So I don't know if they're valid assessments. Now, the top rubric, the visual arts rubric, was designed for use in the Wisconsin Cedarburg School District. The bottom rubric was designed for use by the New York State Theater Education Association. In each case, a committee had to work together and agree that this rubric would accurately assess the work of the students. Not just one person, but a group of people had to come to consensus creating this assessment. For me, This gives the rubric teeth. And if you notice in these rubrics, they list the essential standard here on the Wisconsin Cedarburg top one. And then they have 4 separate levels that the student can achieve. And once they name the levels, they also put in what it means. In the bottom one, the theater voice, right? They graded it by numbers. This is just a different way to do it. You can use numbers, you can use words, but for each number code, 1 through 4, they tell you what it means. For instance, the volume fits the character, clear, dramatic voice. Then if you get down to number 2, the audience has difficulty following the performance because the student uses a normal voice. And finally, the audience cannot understand the lines, right? So it is a continuum, and that's what a rubric is good at. Okay, good. Let's go to, so how do you make up a rubric, right? What do we do? Here's a rubric on the bottom, and it shows the criteria 1 through 4, and it has the words and numbers. So excellent, very good, good, fair, and needs improvement. All right. The criteria here are very clear. The presentation is a delight to the ears of the audience. Number 2, there is a unity among the group members, right? This is for group singing. And singing is executed in the correct tune and tempo. These are criteria that are used in music. And mastery of the lesson is evident in the overall performance. Okay. Now, when a rubric is designed, number 1, you want to consider the desired learning outcomes. What do you want the student to know or be able to do when you have finished the lesson? You will hear that phrase a lot in education. As artists, we usually don't think about that. But teaching artists need to know, what do you want the student to know or be able to do when you have finished your lesson? And you need to know that when you are teaching, because not only are you teaching your art form, you are teaching it in an educational setting. Now, if your learning outcome seems fuzzy, not clear, you might focus on the outcome by thinking about the expected student work or art project, right? This may help you more clearly articulate the learning outcome in a way that is measurable. Okay, number 2, defining your criteria. That's here on the left, the 1 through 4. This is the most difficult part. What does a successful assignment submission look like? Is it, there are people who studied this, and as described by Allen and Tanner in 2006, I need to give credit here. Developing your criteria can help develop an initial list of categories, such as elements of your art form, that the student should demonstrate proficiency in by completing the assignment. Of course, these categories should correlate with your intended learning outcomes that you identified in step 1. Now, this is where your colleagues come in. If you talk with your colleagues, and I spoke a lot about that in the last webinar, your colleagues are important, they're not your competitors. If you talk with your colleagues, and that's teachers of your art form and teaching artists of your art form, right? If you're looking for existing rubrics for similar tasks, they might be able to give you ideas, right? For the categories to consider in your criteria. Now, if you've assigned the task to students before, if you've done this lesson before, and you will have samples of student work and you can show them, this is what I mean by proficient. This is what I mean by approaching proficiency. And that will help them develop a qualitative observation guide of their own work. So these are resources you can use your colleagues, and when you've done this lesson before, examples of the work. Okay? So, in summary about defining your criteria, right? Now, this is from O'Reilly and Sear in 2006. You want to know, what do you want your students to learn from the work? How will the students demonstrate that they have learned this? What knowledge, skills, and behaviors are required for the task? What steps are required for the task? And what are the characteristics of the final product? And you see those demonstrated in the criteria on the left. Now, after you develop an initial list of criteria, you, the teaching artist, have to prioritize the most important skills you want to target and eliminate unessential criteria, or you need to combine skills into one group. Most rubrics have between 3 and 8 criteria. Rubrics that are too lengthy, they make it difficult to understand. The student has to process too many things. Keep it simple, right? And you want them to understand the key skills they need to achieve for the given assignment. So that's how you define your criteria. Then number 3, creating your rating scale. Now you want to have at least 3 performance levels, from adequate to inadequate. And at the minimum, you want to provide an exemplary level to motivate students to strive for better work. So proficient is not always enough. You want to also tell them, if you go beyond this to exemplary, this is what it looks like. Now, rubrics often contain 5 levels. This one does. Excellent, very good, good, fair, and needs improvement, right? And with an additional level between adequate and exemplary, and the level between adequate and inadequate. That's where we see fair and very good, right? Usually no more than 5 levels are needed. Just as I said before, if you have too many rating levels, it makes it hard for the student to understand the difference between them. It's also a good idea to label each level with names. This clarifies the minimum acceptable performance. Labels will vary by assignment and subject, but some examples are exceeds standard, meets standard, approaches standard, below standard, or there is complete evidence of this, there is partial evidence of this, there is minimal evidence of this, and there is no evidence. The language has meaning. Then finally, and you saw that in the previous slide where the level was described, right? You want to fill in the descriptors for each criteria at each performance level. This expands on the list of criteria you developed in step 2. And you write full descriptions. So you have to think, what does an exemplary example look like? So they can strive for that. When you do this, when you're filling in the descriptors, avoid terms like good. And make sure to use explicit, concrete terms to describe what you would make a criterion good. For instance, in a creative writing assignment, a criterion called organization and structure is far more representative and helpful than writing quality. That's something that's demonstrable. You can demonstrate organization and structure. So you describe the measurable behavior and use parallel language, like here in the criteria and here, excellent, very good, good, fair, needs improvement. The language is parallel, that's more clear. The wording for each criteria should be very similar, except for the degree of which the standards are met. And then the descriptors generally have the same sentence structure. That's also important, it makes it more clear. So let's stop the share. That's a lot of talking, Jeff. Okay. So, rubrics. What comments do you have? What thoughts do you have? Is this making sense to use a rubric when you assess an arts project?
I have two quick comments.
Yes, Kimberly.
To throw in. So one thing about a rubric that's really helpful is if you share your rubric with your students at the beginning of your lesson. So as an assessor or as the evaluator, making sure that those students understand what they'll be assessed on helps create ownership over their learning. So they know I have to do A, B, or C to get an excellent or a very good or a satisfactory. They understand what they need to do in order to get where they want to go. And in my experience, I've found it's very helpful to share it on the front end.
Excellent point. Did you say you had another idea? No? Okay, good. Excellent point.
Jeff,
Anybody else?
I was curious about something. When you do you share this, like when a teacher contacts you and says, I would love for you to do residency, is this something that you show a teacher right away, or do you find that teachers often ask for this right away in deciding whether they're going to hire you?
I find that they never ask, ever. They assume that I am able to do this. And when I present them at the end of a residency, I present them, and I told you guys about this in webinar 3, I give them an overview of what we did and what the students achieved. And they're always shocked that an artist can do this. But it's something we all need to do. We're in their world. And if you are asked, now, in the pre-planning stage, if there is an arts coordinator like Cindy Riddle that's involved in the pre-planning, they will ask about things like this. But the classroom teachers usually don't ask. The coordinators of the residency might ask, especially if they are a school arts coordinator or a district arts coordinator or a principal. That's who's going to ask this question.
I also had one more thing to throw in.
Okay.
Sorry. I was just going to also suggest that a rubric is another great tool for you as a teaching artist to use to help guide your practice. So if you're using rubrics to assess your students and you're seeing that in the first 3, they always get it, but the very last criteria that you have, nobody's really getting it. What that probably tells you is you might need to change something to help make sure that they're understanding something a little bit better. So rubrics, when you're looking at them as a whole class or looking at each student's rubric individually, can help guide your practice as a teaching artist to make sure that you're sharing information in a digestible and absorbable way.
Now, you all need to know that as a teaching artist, I don't always let them know the students know the rubric at the beginning. I do, like with mask work, when we're creating, when we're actually doing writing projects in my theater work, playwriting, things like that, I do let them know the criteria. But very often as a teacher, I rely on wonder and awe. And I get them doing before I tell them why they're doing it. Because sometimes if I guide them into the why, they get stuck there. They're trying to achieve it rather than in theater doing it. So I use it both ways, and you need to know that I don't always let the students know. Afterwards, I will let them know what we're really working on. But so prior knowledge is great for some things, and I've found it to get in the way other times. But Kimberly's exactly right. If you present the rubric at the beginning when you're doing a whole project, that lets them know what they are going to achieve. It's very cool. Make sense? Are we good? All right, let's go on to the next topic. Checklist. We talked about rubrics. Let's talk about a checklist. Now, a checklist is different from a rubric. It's defined as just a list of tasks that need to be completed by the student. And a checklist organizes items in a systematic manner and provides both you, the teaching artist, and your students an overview of what task they need to accomplish, instead of just relying on memory. What did Mr. Jef say we're supposed to do? No, if I give them a checklist, this is what I want to see in the work. All right. It's also a way to ensure that everyone, you and the students, are on the same page about what needs to be completed and by when. Checklists are an important way to make sure that your students' tasks get completed. A checklist also helps create ownership, deadlines, and expectations. Now, it's one of the best ways to move a student work forward and to get the student to be productive in their work. Because checklists free up the minds of the student, as it allows an outlet to note all of the key points they need to remember to do their work efficiently. They can refer to it over and over again. Now, checklists also ensure that students always have a sense of direction and they know what they need to do next, right? This gets rid of guesswork, and that helps the student to stay on task. Here's an example of a checklist. Let's show them the next one. This is for choreography. Now, I want you to note that this particular checklist has words and graphics, right? This is another way to ensure that students who have different learning styles are included, right? Give them a checklist that has graphics. And this particular choreographer, working with her students, right, changes the number of things you know at the top. Your performance must include 5 out of the following skills, 6 out of the following skills. That way they can say, okay, I am including a weight shift. I am changing my traveling directions. I have a partner, right? They can see, they have choices. It's not just you have to do all of these. This is a checklist used so that the student has choice. And that's another way to do it. Okay? So now, how do we create a checklist? Yes. Okay. There are 3 usual forms to a checklist, right? The classic list, as you saw in the graphic at the beginning of this section, with boxes. Check the box when you've finished that task, right? It can also be in a table format, and it also can be color-coded, right? Now, a typical checklist should have the name of the checklist. The name of the checklist represents the purpose and the use of creating it. Like in the previous one, a choreography checklist. All right. A time frame, a date, a date range. Now, this section can be created in the form of a column to determine the date or date range or the time frame for each task to be completed. All right. The third thing, add the tasks in your checklist. So you have a brief description, and you could add subtasks under that, right? And you could have a status on your checklist. Is it completed? Am I on the way? Have I not started it, right? And the date and time due. This is knowing when it's due. Lets a student know when it needs to be completed. They have a goal. In theater, we have a phrase, the curtain goes up at 8. It is not a bad idea to give your students a time at which the art should be completed. Because in theater, the curtain goes up at 8. That means everybody has to be in places at 5 till 8. Everybody has to arrive at the theater an hour before. But the set has to be designed 2 weeks before so the actors can work on it. The costumes have to be ready to be worn at least a week before. So everybody has deadlines. It's a good idea for students to understand that. that deadlines are the real world. This is how we work. And that's why creating a time frame is important on your checklist. All right. And then adding the tasks, right? You can add brief description, right? And also include the date completed. So you repeat that for each of the things on your checklist. And most people create a checklist in a physical notebook or on a piece of paper or a notepad, right? You can also do it electronically so that your students have access to it electronically on their Chromebooks, or you can just put it on a chart paper so everybody can see the checklist. There are a number of ways to present it. All right, let's stop the share. Okay, everybody, time for a big question. Rubrics, checklists. In the chat, I want you to say, what do you use more often when you're working? Do you prefer to use checklists? Do you prefer to use rubrics? How do you work? Because different people prefer different ways. That's why I'm offering them. So write it up there. Let us know what you do. Checklist, Cecilia says. Good. Cecilia, what's your art form? Fiber. Oh, yeah, I can see that. Good. Diana, Thad, Cindy, what do you guys find here? Cindy, you've always done both. Good. And Cindy, you're a visual artist, right? Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thank you. All right. I thought so. Diana, Thad, do you have anything to contribute? Okay. Diana says a rubric. And Diana, what art form do you work in?
I do visual arts, specifically sculpting.
Wow. Okay. I can see that with the three-dimensionality and all that, how it's a little more complex. Good.
Right.
All right. Excellent. So they aren't interchangeable, but they are both useful, and different people like doing it different ways, right? And they're the big written down ways of observing. Does anybody have any questions or comments about how you already use rubrics or checklists? All right, let's go on to our third example, observation. All right. I saw this great quote. If I see it, does it count? Right? Yes, it does. Teacher observation is clearly the bread and butter of daily learning. Now, when we discuss it in relationship to assessment, it feels like it's icky, it's taboo. Oh no, is that how we are evaluating or assessing our students? Now, we never question an early learning teacher's right to assess students through observation. We accept that physical education teachers use observation as the foundation of their assessment practice. Coaches, they require observing their athletes, right? You see, observation truly gets at the heart of thinking processes and skill development. And it has a real ability to impact the learning trajectory of the learner. Now, using observation honors your professional knowledge and your experience. And the teaching artist who engages in observation and diversity of learning experiences of students in the classrooms is very helpful. Observation just makes sense. Through observation, we can intervene, we can redirect, we can praise, we can reinforce, we can differentiate instruction and offer timely and specific feedback, right? While the students are working, we don't go sit at our desk and do grades, right? We are there actively involved, observing the students doing the task. And it increases instructional agility and student investment to see that you are observing. And this impacts achievement in meaningful ways. All right. So here are some examples of observation. Right? When we're cooking, we look in the oven, we test for doneness. That's observation. When we fish, you're looking at the lines. I've seen guys at the beach when they have 2 or 3 rigs and they've cast out into the surf and they put them into those, they jam the tubes into the sand and they've got the pole there and they're just sitting there watching those 3 things and 3 lines, and they can tell when they get a hit. This is observation. A coach, we saw this the other night in one of the baseball games I was watching. There was a pitcher struggling at the beginning of the game. This is not a good sign. And the coach was watching, and you could see the coach's attention really become focused on him. This is what they do, right? So that they can offer feedback to the struggling athlete. This is observation, right? And then, similar to the fishermen, I used to live out on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And when you set your crab cages, you can test them. You pull on them a little to see how heavy they are. That tells you when you've got a load of crabs, right? This is all observation. And we do it all the time. And we're just using it in an educational fashion. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right. Now, when you observe students, there are key practices that ensure your observations are aligned to the learning and that your observations are attentive to both your own needs as well as the needs of the learners, right? When assessing through observation, you got to keep these things in mind. Describe what is happening without judgment or analysis. For example, Sophie painted her blocks in red, black, blue, red, black, blue sequence. That is a description of what Sophie did. You also want to have a copy of your learning targets on hand. That could be a copy of your rubric, a copy of your checklist, right? You want to have it on hand, including your criteria for proficiency. You will need that document as you analyze your observations and make decisions regarding what you're going to say, what feedback you're going to give, right? I can see you are fulfilling this element very well. I love the colors. Great choice of colors. Now I need to see you work on this, right? If you have the criteria in your hand, you can do that. And you need to give yourself the time to observe the students regularly, particularly if the learning goals are challenging, right? You need to be right there so that you can observe, see where the students are, and give feedback, right? Your observations can make or break the learning success in both the immediate task and the tasks that follow, right? Are they successfully cutting out the shape that they need? That will impact placement of it in the work of art, etc. Right? Now, in doing all of this, you need to allow yourself to be emotionally involved, to be proud when you see learning and let the students know that, to be proud when you see growth and success, let the students know that. And when you share the pride with the learners, it helps them. Now, you describe what you're seeing and hearing to indicate proficiency. And this is the joy of assessment that also leads to student confidence, hope, and investment in the project. Your being involved will mean they will be more involved. Okay, let's look at a couple ways to observe. All right, these are two ways, a drawing project and a painting project. If you look at this list, this is like a checklist, right? A goal. And then what you want to see, if you know this goal, like in the painting, to create a composition using paint to tell a story, express an emotion, suggest a feeling, develop a pattern, or illustrate the relationship of colors, right? You can assess whether the student recognizes primary colors. You can see it, right? You can see whether they can mix primary colors into secondary colors. You can observe it. It's right there on their palette, right? And you can see when the student gains elementary control of both the paint and the brush. You can see it in the work. And you can see whether they apply paint effectively to communicate their stories. Have they used their techniques to create something that's understandable? And then finally, have they chosen colors that express the emotions they intend, right? These are observable. Same thing for the drawing ones, right? So if you are going to work on observation, you must make sure that what you're observing is observable. It can't be something fuzzy and unclear. All right, let's stop sharing. Okay, now we have 3, right? Rubrics, checklists, observation. We can use any or all of these to evaluate and assess, let's use the proper word, Jeff, assess the students during their learning. Okay? Now, before I share some examples of this, I'd like to know how many of you use observation, and if so, how do you use it, and how do you give feedback doing it? All right, observation. In theater, it's really important because we are watching and listening them. But you guys seem to, most of you, I don't know what Thad does, but Cecilia, Cindy, and Diana are all visual artists. How do you observe, and how do you use that to give feedback? You can write it in the chat. You can raise your hand. Okay. Taking photos. What a great idea, right? Thad, using song, chant, and Thad, what's your art form? Photos to keep on track. That's a great idea, Cecilia. All right, music writing. Okay, yeah. So you can actually see how the children are responding and hear them, right? Good. Diana, an evaluation form. Tell us more about that. Can you unmute Diana and tell us more about that? How you use that?
Oh, yes. So, and hello and thank you. And I don't know why my video is not working. So I think Cecilia and I are working for the Smart Arts program that is run by the Metropolitan Arts Council. And so we are given a form that we give to the students at the end of the art units that we run with them. And so the unit form or the assess form or evaluation form, it's easy for them to fill out with their own answers and, basic simple questions. For instance, what did you learn? Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to find one right now on my computer, but that's what I am referring to.
Okay, so it's a self-evaluation. It's a form that you give the students and they evaluate themselves.
Yeah,
right?
but also the instructors.
Okay, cool.
Or the teaching artist.
Right, for the teaching artist. Great. And is the form standardized for your organization?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I don't know if Cecilia, if you want to add something to what I'm saying. I think Cecilia has more experience than me. She has been working longer for the program, for the Smart Arts program.
Cool. Cecilia?
Hi, yes. Yes, that's right. There are free free assessment evaluation at the end of the unit. So the student have their own questions to answer, and then the teacher has their own observation and assessment, and then teaching artists ourselves have our own assessment as well.
Right.
So there are three.
Free, and then we have
The
taken
teacher and the teaching
photo.
aid.
Yes, and also taking photo throughout every time we visit.
Very, very cool. Yeah. And then on the teaching artist form, is it very much observation, Ben?
Well, yeah, there's observation. Is there anything that we encounter any obstacle, or if there anything that we can achieve, or and also in the future, is there anything we should improvise or change, or any updates if there is going to repeat another school? That's kind of
Cool.
questions.
Cool. This is reminiscent of what some teachers call an exit ticket, right? Which is a checklist that is used at the end of a lesson to make sure the student has achieved the task, right? And your evaluation form sounds that very interesting, very interesting. And so observation is a big part of it, right? Well done. Okay. Now, let's go on to a couple of examples. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, I had the great pleasure of co-presenting a session about assessing the arts at the recent Palmetto State Arts Education Conference earlier this month. And I co-presented with the folks from the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program. Yes, it exists, and it is a great resource. Okay. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Arrowsmith during the session gave a wonderful presentation, and they've allowed me to share some of their examples with you during this webinar. So I want you to know that these are examples created by the folks at the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program. I encourage all of you to visit their website, check out their arts assessment examples. They are very rigorous and efficient. Currently, they have great resources about assessing music and visual arts. And today, the reason they couldn't be with us, they're working on it. They're having their first meeting on including theater and dance assessment as well. So keep returning to this website, and there's the tag for it down at the bottom. Keep going there to see what they are putting on their website, because these are people who specialize in measurement, in assessment. They are not like me, a teaching artist who is assessing. This is what they do, and their language is clear, and it helps me to clarify my language when I assess. All right, let's go to the next slide. As with any organization, the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program, right? They have objectives, right? These are their objectives. And one of the important things, there's a third one, to deliver outcome appropriate instructions. If you know the outcome which you want to achieve, that will inform how you will instruct. And they are really big on this. You cannot evaluate what you haven't taught. You cannot assess what you have not taught the students. So you have to make sure that your outcome and assessment matches up with what you taught. In the theater, the example would be, if I'm doing a theater piece and I am working on rhythm and timing of the scene, I'm not going to criticize the learner on their costume, right? I am going to assess rhythm and timing because that's what we're working on. And that's what that means. And that's something you really need to make sure that you align, that when you teach and you know your objective, that your assessment matches up. All right. So let's go to one of their lessons. The next slide, drawing a landscape. They give the visual arts standard, which they are going to assess. They talk about readiness for assessment to define, identify, and create art based on visual arts vocabulary. That the landscape is going to be two-dimensional, and that the students are, as Kimberly noted, familiar with the rubric right from the beginning. So the students are given the rubric at the beginning. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the rubric. And if you remember, when we talked about rubrics, this is a beautiful, rich rubric. It has 5 levels: exemplary, proficient, approaching proficient, emerging, and needs support, right? It has 2 categories that it's assessing. The elements of art. Every art form has what are called the elements of art. Doesn't matter if it's creative writing, theater, dance, drama, or music. They all have elements of the art, and they're using this a visual arts project, a landscape. So they are all those elements of art. Talks about details, textures, and patterns, right? Those are the elements they're working on. And they're using principles in appearance, composition, distinction, sense of depth, foreground and background, right? This is what they're looking at. And they delineate the difference between all of these. And it's clear. And they use parallel language. Remember all that stuff I talked about a rubric. And they not only tell you the idea, they give you language that describes it. Their descriptors are clear. So I have chosen 2 examples to show you. The first one from the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program. The student was given the assignment of drawing the landscape. They were given that rubric, right? Now remember, the elements were details, textures, and patterns. The use of principles were space and composition, foreground and background, and depth. This was deemed, excuse me, by the teacher to be proficient because, excuse me, cheers. I'm talking too much. Okay. If you notice, under the elements of art, it includes many details. That's the detail. There's a variety of textures used, and textures enhance the drawing, from simple lines to shaded to multiple shadings so that you're using it. And there are a variety of patterns: curved shapes, round shapes, straight shapes, angled shapes, right? So that means that was proficient. Oh, and I should say something here. All of the art standards in the state of South Carolina are about proficiency. And that's why the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program uses that language. And once you become familiar with the standards of proficiency, then you could use them. The only other standards in South Carolina that use proficiency are the PE standards, the new PE standards. So that's important to know. How are the standards used? And they are reflecting that. Now, regarding the use of principles, right? They felt that the artist fills the space in a unified composition. They felt that the environment has a clear distinction between foreground and background. And they felt that the composition has a sense of depth. That's why this particular example meets the qualifications of being proficient from the rubric we saw earlier. Let's look at the next one. All right, this is another drawing, the same assignment, draw a landscape. They were given the same elements, details, textures, and patterns. They were given the same principles in the rubric, space and composition, foreground and background, and depth, right? The teacher, when evaluating this, when assessing this, they said it includes few details, different from the one previous, right? It includes few textures that enhance the drawing. And it includes few patterns, right? There's a lot of empty space. Now that's a different kind of work, but that wasn't the assignment, right? The assignment was to draw a landscape that did this. Under the use of principles of overall appearance, yes, it fills most of the space. The environment has no clear distinction between foreground and background. And the composition has a minimal sense of depth. The road is the only place where we see a sense of depth, right? And so this was deemed to be approaching proficient, right? It needs work to become proficient, to add the qualities of more details, a variety of textures, and a variety of patterns. Now, these are just two examples. And I want you to know that I chose visual arts examples because it's easy to show them on a screen right here rather than showing videos of dancers, etc. Right? If you are a dancer, if you are a theater practitioner, if you are a writer, if you are a musician, your job is to take this idea and adapt it to your practice. How would you define the elements of your art and the use of principles in your art form, in your rubric, so that you can identify whether or not the student meets the levels? That's your job, is to make it applicable to what you do. Also, if you'll give me the next slide, you need to meet the classroom's needs, right? You would change your rubric if they had more time. You would add more arts concepts if you wanted to extend the lesson. Okay, we started with this and we did this, right? You would change your classroom needs if you gave them pastels instead of just a pencil, right? The materials matter. You might make fewer arts concepts instead of more arts concepts, right? And you might give the students other academic standards-based prompts. This is your job. You need to decide what you are assessing, how you will assess it, so that you can create the rubric, the checklist, or observe in a way that helps the student achieve the task, right? And then the one I like the best, revision. When I teach playwriting, and the students, this is middle school and high school students mostly, when I teach playwriting, when they write their script, they think they're done. But when they read it with a partner, if they're two characters, all of a sudden they realize they want to add things or change things. That's called editing. That's a great part of creating. Nothing jumps full forth from the forehead fully formed except Athena, right? And that's the only myth I know where that happens. But so revision, how does that work into the scheme of assessment? And when I tell the students, yes, you can change your language you wrote, it's like an epiphany. Oh, they've never grokked that. Yes, their teachers work on it all the time, right? We want you to rewrite. We want you to do this. But that doesn't make sense until in playwriting they hear it. And then they see the need for revision. And that's an important extension of your assessment. Did they revise it to improve it? If so, how? Right? Okay. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, I've spoken a lot about the South Carolina Arts Assessment Program. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Arrowsmith are very accessible. I loved working with them, and you will too. This is how you get in touch with them. This is where you find their work. I encourage you as a teaching artist to study it. It's part of our job. These are people who do measurement seriously, and they're presenting it in an accessible way. So I encourage you to take advantage of it. All right, let's stop the share. So we have a lot of visual artists here and one musician. Those examples, do they resonate? Do they give you an idea of how these particular teachers used the proficiency level, right? Does it fit? We got a thumbs up from Cecilia. Thank you, Cecilia. Diana, Thad? Okay, yes, Thad says yes, right? Thad, can you see how you would adapt what they have about visual arts to a music genre? Excellent. And Diana says absolutely. Okay, good, good. Okay, now we are getting to the end of this webinar. And as usually, Kimberly has a great survey that she is going to ask you to complete as a part of this webinar. So Kimberly, take it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for attending today. I have just dropped a link in the chat box to our survey for today. So if you wouldn't mind clicking on that survey and just fill out a little bit of feedback for us. This is kind of like our assessment of this program to help us understand what you have learned today, but also how we can help shape these webinars in the future for your programs. So please click. If you could fill it out now, that would be great. We're going to give you just a couple of minutes for that. And while we're working, if you finish up your survey and you have a question for Jef, feel free to unmute or pop it in the chat box. This is a great time to ask questions as well once you finish up that brief survey. Thank y'all.
Carol has joined us.
Jef, maybe while they're working on the survey, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about these 3 different types of assessment is that, every assessment has limitations or strengths of the assessment. Not all assessments are great for assessing all things. I'm a rubric girl myself, but a rubric doesn't assess everything. Sometimes I need to use observation or a checklist. Can you talk a little bit about that, or how do you decide what assessment tool to use at any given time?
Excellent question. All right. I am really big on creating a rubric and intending to work in a certain way. And then in the middle of the stream, sometimes the project goes in a different direction. And that's where you must be observing. You must be observant to know when you have to retool and retread, and because that's where the students are going, and I usually follow their learning, right? And that's a real important part. I think that rubrics and checklists are best used when you're observing. Observation works very well with both of those. I rarely use rubrics and checklists at the same time. I sometimes use a checklist and an exit ticket, which is the checklist that the student self-evaluates and uses to say, I am done, right? However, the observation works well with all of the forms of assessment rubrics that we've introduced today. And yes, there are others. I just wanted to use the ones that are the most applicable to art. Does that answer your question? Good.
Thanks so much.
So when you finish the survey, turn on your camera so we can see you for this final moment. Imagine that. Carol's here. Good to see you. Hey, Cecilia. Good to see you. And we've lost Diana. She logged out. Okay, your cam doesn't work. Okay, good. No problem. No problem. But we've heard you, Diana, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right, everybody unmute. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? There's only a few of us, so we can all unmute. What do you think? Was this helpful, Cecilia? Was this?
Oh, yes. Well, I have been listening all your others webinar before. It's always helpful to kind of, sometimes I forgot something and then okay, yes, I have to do that next time. So kind of you keep every time add on as I practice more, it will be better and better.
Sweet. Diana, Thad, do you have any?
No, Jeff. Okay, so I'm just starting to learn more about how to be a teaching artist. And so this topic is kind of new to me. So, I'm welcome to learn anything and everything about how to evaluate and assess students and art units. So, like I don't have much references, so I'm very happy to learn more about it.
Oh, good. Good.
So it was very useful. Thank you.
Sweet. If you haven't yet already, view the other webinars. The first one about nuts and bolts will be real helpful. And the last one about marketing teaching artists will be very helpful to you.
Indeed.
So we've been doing several.
I will too. Thank you. I just checked on that. I just opened the link and I realized that I missed all those talks. So yes, I will.
Excellent.
I will.
Quick questions about the checklist or rubric. Do you do it every time? Because I guess you're not visiting. Well, for most of my unit, I'm going to visit 5 days with one class. Are you keeping the checklist every time, or just when the class ends, you do all at the same time?
I vary it, right? Sometimes I will if in a residency, if there are several lessons in the residency, I will tell them this is the rubric for what we're doing today. This is our focus today. What are we working on today? And what do I want you to achieve? What do I want you to know or be able to do? And I also have an overarching one for the whole residency. By the end of the residency, what do I want the students to know or be able to do? So that's the beauty of it. You can do it on a small piece and you can do it on the large picture as well.
And do you normally also work with the teacher at the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you create the overarching one, that I always work with the teacher. What do you want the students to be able to get out of this? Why am I here? Right? Why are you not teaching? And I talk like this with them. So what do you want your students to get out of this? And it's different when I'm working with kindergartners, and like this last week when I was working with high school students, right? They have different things they want the children to get. And the reason to bring me in is because my knowledge is deep. It's narrow, but it's deep. And that's part of the conversation with the teacher, right? What do you want the students to know or be able to do so that I can arrange the checklist or the rubric around what they want? That's what I'm here to do as a teaching artist. I'm here to enhance your program.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes like I will share with the teacher, so they will do a certain part while I do the other part, and kind of in the same day we take turns.
Yeah, and there are organizations, if you work in Spartanburg with the Chapman Cultural Center, you get a form sent to you, a pre-planning form that you have to do with the teacher.
Yes, I have that. So I will
Yeah.
going to do that in the upcoming
Yeah,
year.
but each school district is different. Each arts organization is different. If you work for the Metropolitan Arts Council, they have different things they want. And as teaching artists, that's our job. Okay, I don't fight any of it. This is what you want. You're hiring me. Let's go.
So a question about the new grants that you apply, and we have to also do the assessment, and we kind of give it a report back to the South Carolina Arts Commissions. Is that something the Arts Commission will have a standardized evaluation and reflections at the end, or is that something new we have to create ourselves?
Amanda, Kimberly?
Which grant are you speaking about? Do you know?
I remember last time that Jef was talking about there's a new teaching artist grant that if some school interested in the artist residency, and then we can apply directly through the South Carolina Arts Commissions. And I know that we have to report and provide evaluation. That's since Jef is talking about this checklist and rubric. So is there a standardized form?
So the final reports on our grants are standardized, but the grant that you're speaking about, I think, is the school art support grant, and that actually is applied for by the teacher at the school, not by the teaching artist. So the school would apply for the grant, and then you, the teaching artist, could be paid from the grant.
Okay,
and I'll let Amanda talk a little more about that.
Okay. I probably mixed up the two.
Yes, and so with the like the observation forms or whatever feedback that you have from your residency could be submitted within we have a standardized final report which the teacher would fill out, and they would give us a summary of the grant activities. They would let us know how many students were impacted. They would give all kind of that data, but something like a rubric that you've used to assess your program would help the teacher in filling that out. It would really capture the data that we're asking for within the final report. So it would be helpful for the teacher to have that prepackaged summary of what you did in the class.
Does that answer your question, Cecilia? Good.
Yeah. I guess by the time then it will be, everything comes along.
Right, right. Thad, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense, and it could be helpful as a final evaluation, but also like in a progressive residency when you have a lot of different classes, these little checklists. I mean, I kind of do stuff similar to this because you don't always end up in the same place with every group. So you kind of have to keep track of how far you got with each one. So yeah, that gave me some good ideas on how to, try some new ways to be organized on that.
Good point. And we all have residencies like that where one class will be 5 miles down the road further than every other class. And you better know where they are when you get back there tomorrow, right? Good, good point, Dad. Good point. Well, great. Well, you guys, thank you. Thanks for being part of the Teaching Artists webinar number 4. Let's show them the screen here, Amanda. And we'll go to slide 34.
1 second. I got to get myself.
I know. Electrons. We got to get the electrons aligned.
I opened up the survey and it got me on the wrong screen. Okay.
Oh my goodness. I hate it when I get on the wrong screen. Yeah. Keep going. One more. All right. We here at the South Carolina Arts Commission thank all of you for attending this webinar. And before we sign off, I would personally like to thank again all of the folks at the South Carolina Arts Commission who've been so helpful and involved in this project, especially Kimberly and Amanda. Give it up for them today, gang. Yay! Kimberly and Amanda. All right. And also all of the partner organizations, the South Carolina Arts Commission, the South Carolina Department of Education, the South Carolina ABC Project, and ArtsGrowSC. Okay, their logos are right there. They're the people who are presenting this. And I'll stop the share. And I'd like to thank all of you. You guys, great job. Thanks for coming. If we can ever be of help, let us know. We don't know when the next webinar is going to be or what the next step is going to be, but we will let you know because we know where you live now, right? We data mine too. All right. Thank
Yes,
you
and
so much.
you can expect to receive a link to the video recordings once they're up, but they'll all live in that playlist. So if you have saved that playlist address, they'll be right there.